Hello, everyone.
Hello. Um, Eric, I think your sound's not quite working. Or is that just me not getting sound back?
I didn't hear
You
his
know what?
sound right. I don't hear him.
Yeah, I'm also not hearing them.
Oh, well, that would be why then.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hear you, Dwayne.
Welcome,
Okay,
Dwayne.
good. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you.
Eric's worst nightmare. No one can hear him.
Yep.
Just a little bit of humor. My Spanish teacher had to have hearing aids, and we used to mimic talking. So she would turn her hearing aids up, and then we would talk, and it would blow her ears, and then she'd have to turn them back down again. It was funny at the time.
Yeah. My my dad is at that point where he needs aids, and um my mom and dad's fights have basically become the word they basically shout what at each other for 10 minutes until they finally get in the same room.
Ain't love grand?
All right, I can finally hear everyone. I guess I was the problem.
You were the problem.
Beautiful. Zoom does this thing where if you join the meeting that you're recording, but you're currently muted, it gives you the muted recording alert, which only has two options, which is record without audio or unmute myself, which naturally neither of those are good options when I just want to sit here muted for a few minutes while we wait. I think that thing has something to do with it, but that is not important.
We'll have to talk to IT about it.
Yeah, we are a technology company. This is already turning out to be one of our best turnouts for the monthly meetup. It's very cool. So either everyone really liked the suit that you're wearing in the graphic, Chris, or we have some good stuff to talk about today.
Maybe both.
Yeah, porque no las dos. All right, Chris, is it going to be Chris or Hugo doing the gravity times this month?
I don't think we have a gravity times or a LaunchPad times this month,
Because
since
it's kind
gravity
of the
times slash lost LaunchPad times will be basically the presentation. So
beautiful. We still have people filing in here. So typically we get started at 12:05 just so everyone can get a chance to file in. I'm assuming with the amount of participants this month, we probably have some people who are here for the first time. So if you are a first timer, first of all, welcome. Thank you for joining. As you can probably tell from the first couple minutes of this, we like to try and keep this casual, and we also want to try and um, focus on the topics. We want to try and take advantage of the time that we have. So we only have an hour, but our whole idea is we just want to get as many people in the room as possible and keep things casual and just poke around with what the latest, greatest, what new things are happening in our industry, who's got some good ideas, who's encountered some various weird happenings within Jamf, and then also try and go over a topic. So if you have any questions, comments, if we say anything wrong or anything incorrect, please don't hesitate to share that with us however you feel comfortable, whether it's sharing it with the chat. We'll try and watch that throughout the presentation. Also, if you are so inclined, feel free to unmute yourself and share whatever wisdom you may have. I think you'll find that the group is very accommodating. So again, if it's your first time, welcome. We try and do the first Friday of every month unless there's a holiday conflict. And with that, we have made it to 12:05. More importantly, though, we are only two participants away from having 100 participants, which would be very cool.
You're not
Oh, come
nervous,
on.
are you?
Me? Nervous? Come on. I'm just unprepared.
Will you always be sending, so like next Friday in December, you'll send another email to request?
Yep.
Okay.
So if you've joined these meetings or if you subscribed off of our website, you've made it onto my handy dandy mailing list, and I'll send out the invite for the next Jamf admin meetup.
Okay.
I usually try and do that Wednesday the week before, but depending on what's going on, it could come like the Monday. I think this month I sent it out this Monday.
Eric, are you able to make Caleb co-host? I cannot for some reason.
I made him a full host.
He is 0 host right now.
How did someone yoink that back from him?
I gave
Yes.
it back to you. I gave you host, Eric, once I
Okay.
got the service going.
Cool. Well, I just made you a host again for whatever reason.
No, you're not host, Eric. Oh well. I don't know.
I think that's fine.
Oh my God, who's gonna be the host? I mean, can we get
I know.
I don't get it.
I think we're doing great. Mission number 1, which is small
There
talk
we
our way
go.
to 1205, so everyone can join. That mission's been accomplished. Have we figured everything out host wise, guys? Are we good?
We're good.
We have 4 hosts. If the meeting fails,
Great.
Yeah.
we've got our tertiary backups in place.
Mhm.
Great. Well, our first impression, we're currently crushing it right now for all of our new users. Since we're not doing so, typically in every month we'll do what we call the gravity times or the launchpad times, which is kind of just a what's happened in the last month. What are the patch notes? Have there been any Jamf releases? Have there been any new updates or patches to the current Mac OS? We use the moniker gravity times because we bring your Apple news and rumors down to earth, and we usually spend about 10-15 minutes on that segment before moving into whatever the keynote is that month. This month, that's basically all we're talking about. So we're not doing a launchpad times or a gravity times. It's pretty much the entire presentation. Chris, I believe Rocketman owner and lead engineer Chris Shazi will be doing the keynote this month.
Mhm.
Great. So Chris, I'm going to go ahead and share your screen, and I'll kick it over to you. Once you get that up and running, if you wouldn't mind also doing a brief introduction to the guests that we have on the call this month.
Yep. Absolutely. Thanks, Eric.
And as Chris gets this set up, once I unleash Chris, we will be screaming in that direction. So I just want to reiterate, if we say anything incorrect or if you have some input, please feel free. We try to keep this collaborative and casual. And with that, Chris, you are free to go.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. So we are going over Jamf 11 and Sonoma this month, and we are joined by a couple amazing Jamfs, Mark Buffington, Bill Smith, and is Tom on this call as well, Mark or Bill?
I'm not sure.
Haven't seen him.
Yeah, I didn't see him, but he might just not have his video on. But either way, we got a lot of amazing people on this call. As I like to say at the beginning of these, we have over half a millennia of combined Apple experience and Jamf experience with the people in this meetup. And this one's going to be a little bit interactive, as each of us has probably had a chance to play around with different parts of Jamf 11 and Sonoma. So I'm going to try to make this interactive. There's going to be a lot of Jamfs talking. There's going to be me talking. We're all going to learn a lot about what's happening with the new updates with Jamf and Apple. With that, I'm going to get into it. If I can figure out how to do this. So what's the agenda for today? A lot of stuff to go through. We got software update improvements. We've got the requiring a minimum macOS version, requiring file vault, enforcing MDM management, passkeys and managed Apple IDs, platform single sign-on, Apple Watch management, Apple Configurator enhancements, network relays, and then we'll be ending with a Jamf Remote Assist demo. Now, I kind of utilized the keynote that I made for WWDC 2023 updates. And what I want to say about that is when we saw that back in June, I showed this, the information and technologies described within are subject to change. So that's what we saw in WWDC 2023. And now we're at the point where we're like, well, what does this actually look like now that these features exist? So that's what we'll be focusing on throughout this presentation. But more so than just Sonoma, Jamf dropped Jamf Pro 11, and we were super excited to try it out. And I just wanted to give my first impression of Jamf Pro 11. And I will say it was very, very bright. It's very bright. There's a lot of white in it. Maybe don't open it for the first time in the middle of the night. It will blow you away. But the features are what we're going to actually focus on during this time, not just the dashboard and GUI. So I want to talk first about the software update improvements. This is probably the thing most of us are the most excited about with Sonoma. Software updates, specifically macOS updates, has been a pain point for Mac admins since probably Big Sur when things started changing drastically, and the M1 computers as well. So this is what they talked about. Oops. Is this video going? Okay, there we go. This is what they talked about during WWDC. This ability for users to be able to delay these updates, but also for admins to be able to push it based on a schedule and give users a bunch of different notifications and finally force that update in a way that's a little bit more user-friendly, something we hadn't seen. So what does this look like? Well, in Jamf Pro, we use the new software updates area. And this is really what we're seeing with Sonoma, this ability to deploy it at a specific date, which is pretty cool. Now, with the test I didn't get to say, hey, let's do this over the course of 2 weeks and see what it looks like. But I wanted to give you a couple screenshots on what we see here. So the user, when they need to push their update, will see this little box. It'll allow them to either update right now or wait until it forces it. And then when it forces the update and it's about to restart, they get this nice restart message, which is another thing we hadn't seen in the past. It only gives them 60 seconds. Interesting thing though, so when I was testing this, I chose to update it right away, even though it wasn't going to force me to do it for an hour. It didn't actually restart until that forced time that was set before. So it waited an hour before it actually restarted my Mac, which I guess is maybe kind of nice. But I do want to talk about something that really is I think the pain point in software updates. And it really doesn't have necessarily anything to do with Jamf or Apple. It's just the fact that everyone's using laptops nowadays. And if you're going to push a software update, if you're going to push a macOS update, that requires, a lot of disk space. It requires the computer to be on for a while. And it requires a lot of those things. There's a lot of stuff that can interrupt it, right? So one of the things we're really hoping for is more status messages as we go through these updates. Because the problem is you push an update to all your computers, you allow it for a couple deferrals or something, a week goes by, and you come back and only 30% of your fleet has updated. And then cybersecurity is asking, why haven't more people updated? And it's like, well, I don't know if it's because the computers don't have enough disk space, if they didn't have enough battery life in order to do the update, if they, restarted their computer in the middle of the installation and interrupted everything, if the MDM command just isn't going through. Like, there's not much statuses to tell us that. All we can do is look at the management logs of the computer, and you can only do that individually for each computer. So it's kind of a mess. But these new software update statuses seemed pretty promising, where it's like, hey, we're going to get some more stuff that says what's happening because we're using declarative device management, which gives us a lot more abilities. So these are not baked into the Jamf GUI yet, and I don't know if they will be, but one thing we were able to find is that they are in the API. So you can do an API command look up an individual computer by ID. You can also look up a group of computers as well and get a giant list. I'm just showing it for one individual computer. One thing I'll say with a little bit of testing that I did with this, I'm not fully able to understand what to do with this information. And what I mean by it is there's, first of all, these two different things happening here. This is one API call, but I'm getting two different results, and each with an update status ID to it. And then it also didn't always seem to correlate with what's happening. Like for instance, on the top one, you'll see that downloaded says false, but status says installing. So it's clearly past the downloaded status. I'm hoping that I can figure out what is really happening here, because if I can, like, that's something where we could create a GUI or something like that. But I'm going to call on someone from Jamf to talk through. I don't know if Mark, if you understand what's happening here.
Sure. Thanks, Chris. For those that don't know me, my name is Mark Buffington. I'm a consulting engineer here at Jamf, based in Minneapolis. Overlay for some of our sales teams, other customer-facing teams as well. Do a lot of enablement and a lot of Apple beta testing and things like that. So with this, I mean, this particular screen here, there's two different events. One of them is from an historic update from, looks like it's last December. But regardless, what you may be noticing in a lot of newer functionality within Jamf Pro.
So Mark, not to interrupt you, the one on the bottom is actually a different update. So this isn't the one I pushed.
Yep.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. And some of these things, for anyone who's been seeing newer features develop with Jamf, you'll often see a lot of things exposed in the API first. And ultimately, those are the same objects that our team is relying upon as we build out new things in the GUI. So as there's more status and reporting and kind of things in aggregate, it's going to be pulling from these same endpoints. I know I mentioned these status endpoints to you this week, just kind of for reference, because that data is getting sent back through the declarative status channel. In that first one there, you can see that. The bottom one is using the more legacy OS update status query, which doesn't really give much useful information compared to the newer declarative ones. But just to chime in, I guess, since I'm talking, I love the resilience of declarative device management updates, because say if a device was unplugged and low on battery or something like that, and in the past, right when the OS update was going to happen, it would simply just fail, and you would have to have a server-side command sent out again to make it take place. But now with declarative, if it fails to update for some reason, it schedules out and notifies the user that it couldn't be installed. It's going to try again in an hour, and rinse repeat. It never forgets that it had that declaration, that marching order and command, that every hour it's simply going to try again. And once those conditions are right, then it's going to be able to make that update happen as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. And, I wish I had like 10 computers and, a month to just test software updates and see all the caveats of how that will work. But yeah, I do think with declarative, talking to you, Mark, hearing what you're saying, like, this will be a lot better than we've seen in the previous 3 versions, where we just seen so much inconsistency in those updates. So I'm hoping that's going to be kind of the silver bullet to make this easy. And I'm interested to test out this API command more too, and see if we can find more useful information for the status of where a computer is at during those updates. So I can at least tell the cybersecurity team, all right, well, we've got, 40% of the people got it downloaded and 60% are at this stage of the process.
Yeah, and also too, another benefit of declarative device management and status channel is that you don't need to have another inventory update or recon to happen for inventory, smart groups, other actions to take place too. again, because of that declarative status channel. So once it does, say if you're on 14.0 and you go to 14.1, that first boot up immediately is going to inform Jamf of the new OS. And then any other actions, reporting, etc., that you want can follow downstream.
Awesome. Cool. We'll be giving more updates on this once we do like our first big security push with Sonoma and see how easy these updates are compared to previous versions. Moving on, I'm going to talk about automated device enrollment and some of the improvements to that. First of all, requiring a minimum macOS version. That was one of the cool things that was announced. Unfortunately, at this point, talking to Mark and other people at Jamf, this has not been implemented yet, mostly because of the difficulties of testing this with macOS betas. So this is coming soon, I believe. But probably in the next couple months, hopefully, we'll have more of an update on this.
Yeah, and stay tuned. Really, any of our betas, I assume anyone in a Meetup audience like this is in Apple's betas and is in Jamf's betas. So as those things come out, you can check it out. And as Chris was saying, I know during the summer, at least, as things were being tested with this, it was kind of an impossible feat, because if you were going from one 14.0 beta build to the next 14.0 beta build, the device isn't going to be able to see that beta software update seed without the newer process of signing in with an Apple ID and opting into the beta stream. So that kind of slowed some things down. And thankfully, now that we do have more public releases of macOS out, can get some better testing and validation with that.
Perfect. Next thing I wanted to talk about was requiring file vault. So we have this ability to do this in Jamf now. It was actually in the last version as well. But basically, click the button to force file vault enablement. And then also, this is very important, make sure in your pre-stage you also allow that profile. And that's going to be important because, and this is what the user sees. It's very similar to how it was before. It's a little bit better of a screen, but after, at least when we were using Jamf Connect, after that first user account is created, it would prompt us in order to enable file vault encryption. Just a different prompt screen, really. But the thing I want to point out is right now there is a product issue that if you force enable this during the setup assistant and you haven't deployed it during the setup assistant, like I showed in the pre-stage, it will create some issues for the computer. So make sure that you do that. It might even be recommended that you only deploy this to computers that are being enrolled through that pre-stage. Otherwise, that could create problems as well for computers that may be enrolled through user-initiated enrollment or something else. It's also maybe something that'll be fixed in a future release, since this is a product issue right now.
So to add to that, I was actually the one who helped get that message in there as a warning. So it's something we're tracking it with a PI number, but it's not a Jamf issue. It's more of how this profile applies if you're applying it after the setup assistant. So a file vault profile typically has that element of deferred enablement where you choose login, you choose logout. But now with the force enable in the setup assistant, macOS simply ignores those other keys that are in there. So it's more of this guidance here is more of a heads up that says, hey, if you are going to use this force in the setup assistant, cool. But you may want to fork out and have two different file vault profiles, one that goes to just general enrollment, one that goes to automated device enrollment, and have that toggle set up differently each time. So it is something that we're also trying to escalate with Apple, see if there can be some behavior change with that as well. So it's kind of why it's set up here in the meantime as a FYI, because File Vault, of course, is a very important part of everyone's workflows, or should be, if it's not yet, to have that be managed and kind of one of those first things you get set up.
Yeah. And Mark, we were talking yesterday about a different way to enable File Vault using Jamf Connect that didn't require any user interaction. And that might be something that we do for a later presentation, because that's something I didn't even know was possible.
Sure. Yeah.
So stay tuned if you were like, hey, yeah, so you can enable File Vault without notifying the user and without user interaction. Correct, Mark?
Yep.
Yeah. And that's using Jamf Connect. So we'll probably have a later presentation for that, because that seems pretty cool. See the caveats of that and how to deploy it. Next is enforcing automated device enrollment. Now, when I first saw this with WWDC, I kind of thought this doesn't seem all that cool, because file automated device enrollment's kind of enforced anyway if it's in DEP. I know there are kind of ways to get around it and stuff like that too. So the nice thing is, if someone doesn't connect to Wi-Fi, goes through the setup assistant, it will force them to enroll later, which is nice. But the one thing I thought was really cool that I wanted to show is the way it changes our workflow for migrating computers from like one MDM to Jamf Pro. So here's an example that I created very quickly. Before, what would happen during this workflow is we'd have a little notification come up from the side telling them to install the profile. Now it looks like this, where they get a full screen window prompting them to log in and enroll their Mac. It doesn't open profiles. It doesn't do any of that. It's like a nice window that pops up. So this is anytime you use the profiles renew-type enrollment command, this will pop up if it's in DEP with their MDM provider. So I think this looks really cool, and it's a much better workflow than we were doing in the past for migrating the computer over to Jamf Pro for another MDM. Also, if you want to just, like, if a computer removes enrollment or something like that and needs to get enrolled again, this is also going to be better. Moving on, talk about passkeys and managed Apple IDs. Another thing we saw with WWDC. So the new features they talked about is forcing Touch ID and Face ID, being able to control the iCloud keychain, which was kind of cool. Using Face ID and Touch ID to log into corporate products, and defining what users can log into. The only problem with this is using managed Apple IDs, which a lot of us really don't use in a corporate setting. But feel free to drop it in the chat if you are using managed Apple IDs in a corporate setting. Some of the caveats with this, though. So you can't have a personal Apple ID and a managed Apple ID through the same iCloud keychain, and an MDM can't force users to sign in with only their managed Apple ID. So for instance, if they sign in with a personal Apple ID, you can't really manage the keychain because they need to be signed in with a managed Apple ID in order to make that work. So you can kind of set this up, but there's a lot of things that can go wrong with it. Mark, if you have anything you want to add to that.
Not specifically from a Jamf perspective. It is something that I can at least say from customer conversations I've had with other people as well. There is certainly more momentum starting to happen for people to start adopting managed Apple IDs, and really the key to that is the user experience and federation, which sometimes folks are hesitant about. Do you federate? And what's the reward you get on the other side? So Apple is certainly starting to stack and put their thumb down on the scale to really kind of move things from only things like account-driven enrollment types to now have some other services. But yet, as this slide shows, there are a few things that are still kind of that last little bit that we do hear from a lot of organizations that it's like, oh, well, how do I make it so only a managed Apple ID can be signed in on a supervised device? And that's just not possible today. So as with anything, and I don't know. I might sound kind of like a Apple people you hear as well, like file feedback, file those feature requests with Jamf if there's something on our side that we want to do, and give those stories of what you're actually trying to accomplish, and some of those goals as you do those feedbacks.
Yeah, that's always good advice. And I wanted to talk about this as well. So you can restrict sign-in for managed Apple IDs via an MDM. But I do want to point out that this is not supported yet by Jamf. So even though you can see it in Apple Business Manager, if you're using managed Apple IDs, don't turn this on, or they won't be able to log into it if it's enrolled in Jamf. Next, I want to move on to talk about platform single sign-on. This is one of those things we've kind of seen several times throughout the WWDC, and they seem to be adding more features to it. So two of the things they talked about, one was being able to create a local user account using platform SSO, and access from system settings to be able to access platform SSO. Both these things seemed really cool, but of course they have to be supported by an identity provider. So I was able to test out doing this through Okta. And I'll show you what the experience looks like. Go ahead and log in, click Setup. Enter your password, and then you need to do two-factor authentication. And then I was really excited to see what this would look like. And then it didn't work. So stay tuned. I might come back with the ability to actually do this. But it looks like we're still working out some kinks with Okta in order to get that to work. What will this be? Will it be like kind of a cool thing? People are wondering if this will be a replacement for Jamf Connect. At this point, I've still never been able to test this out with any identity provider, so I can't say much.
With platform single sign-on, I just wanted to call out a couple things with it as well, as far as more resources. Firstly, from a Jamf perspective, MDM is required. So single sign-on extension payloads, which Jamf supports both the V1 and the V2 SSO extension payloads. So if you have an identity provider that supports platform single sign-on, either the V1 type from Ventura that was announced, or which currently I'm aware of Okta and Microsoft having those in preview modes to be able to test. And that's going to be testing for the macOS 13 Ventura features with platform single sign-on. And to look at it, it's more of making that user experience good on the machine, where, like, yes, you can synchronize a password and work with that, but single sign-on extensions are really about being that simple, no password needed authentication as you open up compatible applications, websites. You just automatically get signed in and reusing that trusted authentication that's on the device, which is pretty cool. The Sonoma features, there are some where people might look at it and be like, oh, local account creation at the login window. Is this something, do I need to get rid of Jamf Connect if that's something that you're using for provisioning just-in-time users or things like that? But that's not exactly quite there yet. With platform single sign-on, there's elements like the login window does not support any sort of MFA or multi-factor authentication. And then it's also not really built for like a zero-touch feature either. So Joel Rennick has a great session that he did some live demos at Mac Sysadmin 2023 recently. So he goes through all of these different steps in the user experience of it. But with it, I kind of look at it as something that might benefit, or rather the V2 Sonoma features that nobody's shipping could benefit something like a computer lab, where on first setup through automated device enrollment, An administrator has to be in user space and register with the identity provider. So there does need to be some hands-on there. But if you're using the new Sonoma features of PSSO, you can enable this shared keys functionality if the IDP supports it, where at the login window, the next user accounts can be provisioned and be set standard or admin when it comes to those as well. So not really a zero-touch replacement, not the same as other things that Connect does as well. And who knows, we might not see it for another year from the IDPs as well for the Sonoma features that are there. But check out Joel's session. If you're curious on this, it goes way into the nitty-gritty, good details there.
Cool. Thanks for that info, Mark. Next is Apple Watch management. Kind of a cool thing we saw at WWDC. Couple things: must be paired to a managed iPhone, and users prompted to enroll, and you can enforce it. Talk through a couple of the management capabilities here. Talk through a couple different ways to deploy apps. It can be a paired app, a dependent app, or a standalone app if it's just on the Apple Watch and not the iPhone. And this is something where kind of wanted to reach out and see what type of feedback people have. So this seems cool. Personally, this isn't something we're looking to do for any organizations that we manage. And I don't know if anyone else has a use case where they're like, I really want to be able to manage an Apple Watch. It's cool when you see a new type of management thing, but I think as Todd said in the chat, we ignore the watches. That's, I think, kind of the sentiment so far. But yeah, if anyone has any use cases or anything like that, feel free to drop it in the chat. Feel free to speak up if you want.
Yeah, and when it comes to watches, as this screen says, if you have use cases that you want, our product teams are actively working with customers that have interest. Like if it's a serious interest for watch management, they're having those conversations, helping validate research and work as that gets looked at here as well. But it is kind of a different scenario. There's new app APIs, as the previous slide was showing, different types of apps, which are different flags that kind of weren't there before in the old apps and books APIs that vendors use. So it's kind of a bunch of new systems and a holistic management of a supervised iPhone and a watch that need to be effectively treated almost as one managed object. So different ways, some different things, but if you've got the use cases, please share.
Hey, Mark, this is Chris Luger. How you doing?
Hey, Chris.
Hey, Chris.
Hey, man. So actually, interestingly enough, I was just talking to Tim Knox a couple weeks ago about Apple Watch. Those of you that may not know me, I'm an enterprise SE at Apple, based in Minneapolis. So, but I was talking to Tim Knox about Apple Watch because I see so much potential. And I just want to be transparent. I was also talking to Adigi and some others, right? Finding out where the focus is, where's the priority with really managing Apple Watch, right? And I just want to share again use cases, right? So I do have an account that has built some custom, basically enterprise watch apps for disinfecting and cleaning, so they can interact with a watch app to identify if I'm going to go into this facility and wipe it down. I'm going to disinfect it, and the watch also then will track motion of my hand as I'm actually like wiping down surfaces and that type of thing. So that's one use case where I have seen it being used. And I have other, like you mentioned, Mark, really is these are meant to be managed as a pair, right? Supervised phone with Apple Watch. And there are other use cases where I have organizations where a shift worker would, go to their locker, they check out a watch and a phone for their shift, and then they use it for their shift. And the watch can be anything from corporate communication to task list, but also, we look at it as much as, health and safety too, right? We're looking at, sound notifications, trip and fall detection, that type of thing. So that's just a couple of the use cases that I've seen in the enterprise and just wanted to share.
Nice. Thanks, Chris.
Good to hear from you again, Chris.
Absolutely. Thanks for sending over the invite. I'll try to be here when I can.
I'd love to have you on any of these. Always good to get feedback from Apple.
I can't be the only person that thinks that's kind of crazy. What you were saying about the use case with tracking the motion on the watches. That's I feel like that could go in so many different directions. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm still waiting for someone to make a really good air guitar app for my Apple Watch. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, we're bringing back Guitar Hero.
Cool. Moving on, I want to talk through some of the Apple Configurator enhancements. There's really one main thing I want to talk through, and it's the ability to automatically assign a device to a specific MDM server. And I have a quick screenshot of what that looks like on iOS. Pretty simple. You can either choose a default server for the MDM assignment, or you can choose a specific one if the default one isn't the one you actually want to enroll for this device. Didn't get a screenshot for macOS though. Oh yeah, and this shortcuts for Apple Configurator. I didn't actually get a screenshot of what this looked like, but this is what it looked like in the presentation back in for WWDC. Talk about network relays next. So one thing they talked about is this is a replacement for corporate VPNs. Can be deployed via a configuration profile. And it can be developed into applications, and it's available for tvOS. All sounds like cool stuff. I haven't actually seen any real world scenarios where this was being done. I don't know if anyone has any examples. It's not actually in Jamf Pro yet, but I was able to pull up an iMazing profile screenshot of it. Again, until this is implemented somewhere, I can't really say how it works or how well it works. But does anyone have any examples or use cases of network relays being used anywhere in their environments?
And yeah, it would likely have to be something that your existing vendor for things like VPN would have to be implementing. But certainly, I don't want to hog the air here. I'm curious to hear if people have vendors that are using those as well too. Just if there's anything that I can relay back to others here at Jamf.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, feel free to speak up or throw something in the chat if you do. I have a feeling that something like this is probably going to take some time to be implemented into any application. So it'll probably be another year before we actually see this anywhere. But
strikes me just a little bit reminiscent of Tor network.
Network relays.
If you were using a variety of relays, to sequence through, I don't know if that's actually doable with that or not, but that was the first thing that kind of struck me as an application of it. If you were in an unsafe area of the world, for example, and needed to get information out that way.
I was wondering more if it was more along the lines of like Zscaler private access or something where you set up servers that have access to other things and it does a certificate based, some sort of certificate based authentication that gets you to access to something internal.
Yeah, Chris, this
private.
is Matt. That's what I was kind of thinking too. I wasn't 100% sure what you were asking, but we have some legacy older, I hate saying products or content management admin pages that people will elect to lock down by IP address, and then with everyone remote, you could come through that same address. Maybe, I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, I think all that's a possibility. I believe it needs to be like someone needs to implement it into an application or something like that for it. Like you can't just implement this now without having something in place, I believe. But me not having a background as a network engineer, sometimes I'm not quite sure how all this stuff works. Moving on, the last thing I wanted to do, Mark provided me with a demo of what Jamf Remote Assist looks like. So this is on the beta, so this isn't available yet on the current version, but if you look up a computer, you go to the management tab and you click start session. If it's a Jamf managed computer, they just click the allow button and it allows you to screen share their screen. One thing I think is very interesting about this, you can see right now the screen is being shared. The user is not required to enable screen recording in order for this to work. I don't know how that is the case, but kind of cool. So users are you're able to see the user screens. They do have to accept it, but after that, they don't have to go into system preferences and enable screen recording. Mark, you can talk through what's happening right now and shortcuts if you want.
Sure. So this was a demo that I shared. Actually had it recorded and parts of it were in the JNUC keynote, and then also in the at the Jamf booth if anyone was at JNUC. But being that it's still in beta, I figured, hey, instead of a live demo, we can show this. Anyone who's in the beta program with Jamf, sign in at Jamf account to sign up for the beta, get that beta instance, and it just stays up to date as new betas come out. But with this, it is something that users are notified as a session starts. They have to get permission for it. The actual demo here, I know it's a little bit small, but it's something that once I learned about this new thing this summer of accessibility shortcuts. So the Shortcuts app, if you look for accessibility on macOS or iOS, there's some awesome things where you just put in what sort of things you need help with. And then the Shortcuts app spits out a whole list of different Apple KBs, tutorials, etc., that can help you with those accessibility things. So if you don't know about those and want to support that for your users, have them check it out. My wife's a special ed teacher, and immediately when I learned about this, like, that's something we gotta show in a demo here to really look at that element of people helping people and doing cool things with Apple tech. But on the general topic of remote assist as well, check it out. There's going to be a lot more documentation and information that's out there soon as things get released, just to kind of take that a step further. But certainly a nice tool to have in the toolkit if you're looking to assist users and be able to help out in those screen sharing type of needs with Jamf managed devices. Yeah, I mean, looks pretty cool. We just got the beta and started fooling around with it. But yeah, this looks like it's going to be amazing, a really cool replacement for other screen sharing tools, and honestly looks much easier. There were some people asking, is there going to be any additional cost to this? Do you know, Mark, or even have? No cost differences. When I was starting to respond to a question in chat asking if it's available for on-prem, yes, it is available for on-prem as well. It is something that Jamf Cloud does function as a relay, so you need to have an active cloud services connector enabled and the right network traffic that we have documented to get to that. And then if you are on-prem, if you're in the process of enabling, you would choose what Jamf Cloud global region you would be using as that relay for the session registration actions and things like that. So that's something, if you're on-prem, you should be able to see it in 11.1. And if you're in the beta, of course, can test that out with a free cloud-hosted instance with our beta program, which that gives everyone access to.
I have a question on this, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, just a while back, I had gotten or kind of got back into our test instance of Jamf Pro. It was there before I joined the company back in June, and no one had any login credentials for it. So I just reached out to Jamf and just had them redo the whole thing. And so I'm logged into it right now. But I've asked a couple of times, can you guys put the beta on this? Is that not what can be done? Because it doesn't seem like I'm getting a good answer for that. Because I'd love to be able to test out this new functionality, but yet I'm being denied the ability to do it because apparently it's just too darn complicated to make it happen.
Is the one your instance you're referring to like a cloud sandbox or a cloud demo and test instance?
I think it's let me go into the Jamf account because you actually just said something that sounds familiar to me. So give me just a quick moment. Hopefully this will pick up my darn it. I was logged into Jamf Nation earlier, but I guess it must have logged me out. But yeah, let me get into the account real quick because as I recall, I think it said something about sandboxed. If I'm not mistaken. Thanks for your help on this. I'm sorry I interrupted. So yes, it's Jamf Cloud Sandbox is what it's labeled as type.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with that, so firstly, if anyone's who's a Jamf Cloud customer, you're always going to have your production instance, and anyone can request from Success the demo and test instance. The demo and test instance is just going to be like for testing. It doesn't get the betas, but if you go into Jamf account and the feedback programs area and sign up for a beta that way,
I actually am signed up for
okay.
beta, but I did
because that should make a cloud instance that's in the beta, and then as say an 11.2 beta comes out, it then gets updated to that as well.
Yeah, so it's a whole new instance that's now beta.
Yeah, I'm actually seeing now create a cloud instance for this enrollment. I just didn't want to have another instance to have to worry about is the point. So yeah, all right. Because we already had a test Jamf Pro server, it just seemed logical to me to simply use that as opposed to spinning up something completely new. All right. I was gonna speculate on something. You mentioned earlier that the remote access doesn't require like screen recording abilities, but I guess you guys probably have noticed that neither does Apple Remote Desktop, which I always found very interesting. So I'm wondering, is that what Jamf is utilizing? Is that Apple like the ARD agent or the screen sharing agent or something like that?
So I'm not familiar with all the tech on that yet. However, there is an element of if you are trying to log in, say you've got like a Zoom room or something like that. Maybe it did a software update and it didn't auto log in, for example, and it's just stuck at the login window. If you have remote desktop enabled, so say use the MDM command to enable remote desktop, then Jamf Remote Assist can allow for an administrator user to authenticate. And that is using some of the ARD functions there to start the user space session and get logged in that way. So that's maybe like a real world example that if anyone is managing Macs in a Zoom room, might be a great piece in the tool belt.
Yeah, I've always thought it was interesting that when Apple started this thing with the screen recording functioning. Was that with was it Catalina or Mojave when they started that
It was
screen?
High Sierra.
What? In Sierra?
Yeah, High
Oh my
Sierra,
God.
1013.
Sierra. I'm gonna feel stupid now because I should have known that. Actually. But basically, I just noticed that Apple Remote Desktop has never required that. I'm thinking, someone could just pop into someone's Mac and they would never get a notification. Now, starting with was it Big Sur? They actually do get some kind of like, but basically you just pop into someone's computer, they wouldn't know what was going on unless they just happen to see a little icon on the menu bar. But oh well. Anyway, I don't want to tie this up. I just was really wanting to get my hands on Jamf Pro 11 because there's a lot of stuff I want to try out, like the new onboarding feature. That's what I'm wanting to see. This is something I've been wanting to happen for a long time.
So we've got I don't want to cut you off, Howie, but we've only got 4 or 5 minutes left here.
I got it. I'll shut up.
I don't think we have a hard stop, but I think we do have a soft spot or a soft stop. So if anybody else has any questions, I think we can probably go at least a couple minutes over.
Yeah, I've
and if
got
you don't have
one
any
thing
questions, go ahead, Hugo.
about remote, since we're still on that topic. So when you check that security box, it deploys that Jamf Remote Assist PPPC profile to the device when self-service updates. One thing I noticed since the Jamfers are here was my machine I was logging into from the Jamf Pro admin console using remote was on 14.1, and I was getting prompted for Finder. It said Connect Assist wanted to control Finder. So I had to create a separate PPPC profile for that. Have you guys heard of that at Jamf? Has that been brought to your attention yet?
I personally have not seen that, but it may be dependent on the action in use. I believe I have seen some people give some feedback on that, having ran into that. But it is something that, as it is coming out, more and more refinements are coming for better logging, better other things on there as well. But the default PPPC should be able to make everything work as you need it to with the remote assist.
Awesome. All right, thank you for that. And the last one was, you had mentioned the logging, which was, I was going to follow up with that. When I'm playing with this, the loggings, I find stuff in the MDM commands that are sent, but there's no like logging, like history tracking. And I think that's going to be a big ask. Is that something you guys have in the pipeline for this? Like, are you going to add like a history to what admin initiated a call with what computer?
Well, let's see. I'm not an official person to represent of what exactly is coming when, but yes, that is definitely something that is desired from everyone internally and different external to Jamf folks as well. So, but certainly it is something we are still in the time of feedback, wanting to get some more things refined, but at the same time wanting people to get more hands on it now that it's been run through the ringer a little bit more.
Where is that checkbox? Sorry.
If you go to settings on the Jamf Pro dashboard, if you go to settings and then computer management, the computer management tab, and then you go to security. If you're on 11.1, I don't even know if I'm supposed to say this, but there's a checkbox for remote assist if you have the beta, and you can click that. And then that, I believe, from what I've gathered, I believe then the next time you run a check-in on an end user machine associated with that server after that checkbox has been selected, self-service will update, and then it'll deploy that PPPC profile to allow Jamf Connect or a Jamf Remote to connect to the device. I may be wrong. I'm not a Jamfer. This is just me playing with a machine, but yeah, that's where you'd find it.
So real quick,
policy, and then a policy run then triggered an NDM send. Is that what you're saying?
Well, so whenever I believe it's through a mechanism where once the computer checks into Jamf, then it gets that update of that checkbox that you just selected. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so not a recon, just a check-in.
I don't know for sure. But that's what I found. That's what I found worked.
So real quick here, guys, before it is the top of the hour, I think we can go over for about 10 minutes. Oh, this is horrifying, whatever's about to fill in there. But I just want to say, so our next meetup will be on Friday, December 1st, and we will actually be having Dan Snelson presenting on his tool, Set Up Your Mac. So for those of you that know Dan Snelson, that should be a very exciting presentation. And if you don't know Dan Snelson, just take our word for it. It'll be a really exciting presentation. And that'll be on December 1st at noon Mountain Time. Let me just check that. Yes.
Wait.
Also, just one more tidbit, we can get back to questions. For those of you that haven't been on this meetup before or not familiar with, what this meetup is or even how you found yourself here. So we're Rocketman Tech hosting this meetup. We are a Jamf services partner, a Jamf MSP. And if you guys have any sort of difficult situations or you're looking for insight or consulting related to Jamf, this is our bread and butter. So please feel free to reach out to us at rocketman.tech. Other than that, thank you guys so much for coming. I don't want to take up any more time. So I think we do have about 10 minutes that we can go over if anybody else has any other questions. But thank you everyone for coming.
And also, in the wise words of Eric Pye, please like and subscribe.
What are we asking them to like here?
Well, that's if they're listening on the YouTube.
Channel. That's right. I forgot that we're live streaming. Okay. I was like, are we just asking them to like this internally? In the kindness of your heart, please just, like this.
Like it internally too. Yeah, that'd be great.
We just want to be like
if you're watching this on YouTube.
All right. Does anybody have any other questions, pontifications, predictions?
One thing I'll chime in, I heard someone mention it before, speaking of JNUC and the self-service onboarding as well that was shown there. And also in the topic of Jamf Pro 11.1, that is also in the 11.1 beta release and that release too. So pretty cool to be able to set that up, get policies, profiles, and Mac apps in there in that native interface to choose the order and the different scopes of what you want to get deployed.
Is that, I'm sorry to just jump in there, but is there any customization that's allowed in that? Because, a lot of companies, mine included, would probably want to have some kind of branding in there.
Today, not any branding in this release, but certainly keep giving feedback. I know there's been some pretty active threads with our product team in the beta forums.
Yeah, got to get my hands on it first before I can start giving feedback. But I'm really excited about it because I like all there are different solutions out there. There's I use Depth Notify quite a bit, and then Nelson's Set Up Your Mac is really awesome. I was working on it before I had to stop to deal with some more pressing issues, and now I'm about to jump back into it. I'm actually going to start completely all over with that thing because that's why I'm so happy that he's going to be presenting next month. But
I just set it up.
What's that?
Just to chime in, I just set up your Mac yesterday, actually, coincidentally. I really like it a lot as a replacement for Depth Notify. But as Joel apparently said, Depth Notify should be around for a while because it's so simple.
Well, yeah, what worries me about Depth Notify is it's not being actively developed anymore. So exactly, like, when is Apple going to eventually kill it because it, for whatever reason, doesn't work anymore with macOS. So that's otherwise I'd keep wanting.
Well, he said specifically it's a universal binary, and all it is scripts. So he said until there's a time when the universal binary won't run, he said it'll run until then, or until scripting language changes, like with Python or whatever.
Yeah, that's good news, actually. That makes me feel better in case I decide to go back into Depth Notify again. So, all right, good stuff.
I had a question about device compliance, if anybody's interested. Basically, we converted to CA from CA to DC. And I did notice that kind of unexpectedly, it pulled all of the Intune records out, which I didn't really expect. I noticed it last night for the first time. And so I had to tell everybody now we have to look in Entra ID for machine records. And then I got a huge fire that exploded yesterday because our security guy said, well, we can't run Defender without Intune. And then he told me that all my setups were failing, which turns out to not be true. And everything was fine. But am I right? Does anybody know in that now you just look at Entra ID and possibly the OS version might be out of date for a while? That's kind of what we're seeing.
Yeah, that experience of how the devices interact with Microsoft services sounds accurate. Initially, the conditional access integration that Microsoft and Jamf built together was unique to Jamf and Microsoft, and they had APIs that certain inventory data fields would be then sent to Intune to then parse through and set your access policy rules. Microsoft transitioned to their partner service APIs and partner compliance, making it not just a Jamf thing, but a whole ecosystem thing where anyone can integrate with Microsoft. But the partner compliance APIs go just to Entra ID. So it's going to be looking at it and just giving a thumbs up or thumbs down, compliant or not compliant. And that may be needed to put into your access policies. I'll leave that there. That's kind of the extent of what I know from personally having hands-on with some of the Microsoft compliance integrations.
I'm getting ready to do that on the Friday after Thanksgiving. So did it go pretty smooth? You just switched over and devices started reporting in properly? I keep
it actually
panicking.
it actually went remarkably well. I had my doubts, but there were still some Intune records in there with the cut date and time stamp on them, which were just superfluous records that were left over. But yeah,
right.
Once we got it up and running, we did the switch. They started just flowing into flagging in Jamf as device compliant or registered, I should say, because there's all these different levels. There's, you know what I mean?
Right.
Registered, not registered yet, compliant, not compliant. But then we did what was documented. So we did the compliance groups on the Jamf side, actually using the exact same names that were in the demo. So then those are fed. And then I did a test yesterday just to see if it would break anything. So I updated all of the compliance OS levels to 13.6.1 and 14.1. And those were fine because, again, it's not going to Intune anymore, even though it's kind of passing through Intune. From what I can see, there are no records in Intune, like I said, and that caused a huge problem. But it seems like that's actually feeding through to Entra in some way because Entra is reporting that they're managed or at least partially managed by Intune. But to answer your question, yes, it actually went really, really well.
Good.
I was really impressed with it.
And then does it seem to update?
I didn't break anything, but the records, what's that?
Does it seem to update the status pretty quickly? Like if you're non-compliant and you update your OS and when it reboots, it goes, hey, he's up to date now?
Yeah, because it's front loading from Jamf. Again,
Right.
That's what it looks like. But to be totally honest with you, we aren't using device compliance and we weren't using conditional access. We were using CA more of an inventory for Intune. So in our term notices and stuff, we're gonna end up going with certificates for device compliance. But my boss is a Microsoft X employee and he wants anything possible integrated from Microsoft. So we did the switch just to kind of.
Well, we're full conditional access, so that's why I'm picking a nice quiet day when most of the US is off anyway to do this change. But
yeah,
so, and I'm excited because we can get way more compliant now. I mean, you can actually do fun things with compliance as opposed to what Intune does. So check for profiles and all kinds of good stuff.
Yeah, basically anything on the Jamf end. I mean, really, as far as I can tell.
Yep.
Which is much better.
Cool. That's like I was just getting ready to ask that question, so thanks.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I did forget one thing. I wanted to give a really special thank you to Mark from Jamf for joining this call and throwing himself into the proverbial fire. I know you guys don't have to do that, so I really appreciate it. We appreciate you guys stepping up and answering those tough questions that might not always have answers. So thank you, Mark, for joining.
Yeah.
I think Bill might still be on here somewhere. Oh, there he is.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I didn't say anything, but you're welcome.
You were in the chat.
All
Yeah.
right. I think with
You handled the
that,
questions.
if we
Sorry.
have, feel free to reach out to us with any sort of questions, and we will do our best to get back to you guys. Otherwise, we are looking forward to next month on December 1st. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I think this
Thank
was
you,
our most
guys. Thank
attended.
you.
Thank you. Everyone have a
There we go.
great weekend. Can't wait to see you all next month.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
guys.
much, everybody.
It's always great.
Appreciate
Thank you,
it.
guys.
So much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jamf, for joining us. Always amazing to have you to be able to answer questions and give amazing insights.
Definitely.
Yeah, and Chris from Apple, thank you as well. Big time.
Chris Shazi, thanks for presenting.
No problem. Hopefully we get more guest presenters in the future.
Eric,
Have a
thanks
great
for
weekend.
emceeing.
Have a great weekend, everybody.
Caleb, thanks for helping me invite people.
You're welcome. All right. I'm gonna close it out. Have a wonderful week,
Close it.
guys.